Good morning. Right now it's 10:19. It's 10:19 on a Tuesday. I had Dr. Aaron Chop here in studio. Now I got Texas State Representative Mays Middleton. I'm going to throw us on the FM. If you're watching on social media or going back and listening on the podcast, thank you for taking the time to tune in. We're going to have some fun, and I'm going to learn a lot, and I feel like you are too. So if you're on Facebook, smash the share button, and then let me know what you got going on today. Good morning. This is KHEA Radio, 99.5 FM. This is Kickstart. I'm Gardy. It's 10:20 on a Tuesday. I had Dr. Aaron Chapa in studio, and we were talking about heart health, and we were talking about a whole bunch of other stuff that whenever it comes to health and nutrition and how you can live a healthy lifestyle. Right now, I have the healthiest man in the world in studio. I got Mr. Mays Middleton. Mays, whenever it comes to health, how are you doing?
I don't know about healthiest. We got 6-year-old twins and a 2-year-old, so we're on the macaroni and cheese and Chick-fil-A diet pretty often.
Hey, my kids are on the exact same diet.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I saw a picture of your family that you had posted from your social media page the other day. You have a beautiful family.
Thank you. I took them to Monster Jam this weekend, and it was a boys' Sunday, and man, they loved it. It was cotton candy and hot dogs all day.
That's cool. That's cool. Monster Jam. That's the one where it gets loud in there, doesn't it?
Yeah, we had to do the headphones, so we sat pretty close, to the front, and they were a little disappointed none of the trucks caught on fire after they crashed, but, they liked it when they crashed. Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah, that's cool. Man, I have been invited once to that before, but I didn't have the opportunity. I couldn't make it, but it looks like such a good time. Yeah.
It is. It's a really fun dad and son event.
All right.
They're real into cars, though, too. So
yes,
the 2-year-old calls them jump trucks, so he wants to drive a jump truck.
They get some air.
Yeah, they get some 20, 30 feet in the air.
Yes. So if somebody is tuning in and they have not had the opportunity to meet you yet, can you introduce yourself and then share, everything that you have going on?
So I got elected in 2018, in November of 2018, and this was my first legislative session was January through June 2019. And it was my first time to be in elected office. I never thought I would have a government job. Ended up having one. Very grateful to get to represent Chambers in Galveston County. So on the Galveston County side, where we are now, the district starts just south of KHEA and has Bayview, Bay Cliff, San Leon, Texas City, Lamarck, the whole island, all the way to San Luis Pass, and then Bolivar and High Island. And then all of Chambers County, where I live in Wallaceville. So
yes,
it's a true blessing to get to represent this district and also get to represent our values of faith, family, and freedom.
Why did you feel the need to run? Because you're a successful businessman. You've done a lot, had a career before, and you still do. I believe you went to law school, and you've done a lot. Why did you feel the need to stop, put on pause, and maybe put something on the back burner and then run for office?
Well, a lot of it is about the next generation. I got Macy and I blessed with 3 little boys, and I was just really, frankly, not seeing the values that our state was founded on and the values that I know are important in this district put into the action the way they should be put into action in our state capital. And, sure enough, that proved very true when I got there. That building is largely run by lobbyists. And they are not friends of the taxpayers, are not friends of faith and family. Mm-hmm. And those are the things we have to fight for. So there's just not enough action and fight to push those forward, and put those into action, put those into real legislation for taxpayers and for Texans.
So what is a lobbyist? What do they do?
Well, lobbyists are on all sides of the issue. Some of them are private, so people, I guess companies hire their own lobbyists to do things. But I'll tell you, the worst kind of lobbyist in Austin is the taxpayer-funded lobbyist. So that is the lobbyist where they're taking your property tax monies,
mm-hmm.
city, county, school districts are, and hiring Austin lobbyists. Either they do that directly, so they contract with the lobbyist, or they pay dues to an association like Texas Municipal League, Texas Association of Counties, and Texas Association of School Boards, and then that entity hires a contract lobbyist.
Wow.
So it's very pervasive, unfortunately. And I'll tell you, I think Texans are really tired of their property tax money being taken and spent on Austin lobbyists who are often advocating against their best interests. Because this is money, frankly, we're not spending on roads, filling potholes. We're not spending on teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We're not spending on police. We're not spending on fire. This is your money being diverted to the pockets of Austin lobbyists, and they're fighting things like property tax limits. They actually were against the ban on
because that's where they're getting their money, and they're
exactly.
like, we want more money. It's tax money,
right?
So they're getting paid,
right? So they're not representing you; they're representing taking more of the money out of your checkbook and your wallet to basically pay themselves.
See, so the way you describe that, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan of that, right? It seems like there's other things like, schools and roads, like you mentioned. There's other things that money could be used for. Is there a way that we can stop it or spread awareness? How do you stop that?
Well, actually, I filed the bill to ban that practice this session, and we've done polling on it before as well. 91% of Texans, so Republican plus Democrat, are against this practice.
And I feel like that's unheard of. Everybody's like comes together and it's like, we don't like this. We don't like this. 91% of everybody is just
and
like,
the other
9%
are the ones in the Capitol, right? That don't like this bill. But I filed it this session, and it had never gotten a hearing before. It had really never gone anywhere. It's been filed before.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of momentum. We had people helping us. We had the speaker helping us, Lieutenant Governor. The governor has said many things to support this in the past, and finally, we got it through the Senate, and it came over to the House, and that bill died with 18-vote loss in the Texas House. And in the gallery, so, there's the House floor, and then above it is the gallery where you can kind of come and watch everything. That gallery was filled with the taxpayer-funded lobbyists that day that bill came to the floor, and they cheered the moment that it failed. And, man, that was the voice of the Austin Swamp. It really was.
So these lobbyists, are they talking to the people who have the votes? Is that what they're doing? Like they're like, hey, we need this. Or is there money exchange? Is that legal, illegal? I don't know.
They're working against it. So all session they were trying to kill the bill because, they are on the wrong side of about every issue. So they were against election integrity, so that's making sure only citizens vote. They're against that. We had this big ban on a state income tax. It was a constitutional ban on a state income tax.
Mm-hmm.
And literally they were against that. And 75% of Texans voted for that ban. So they're out of step with 75% of Texans. And that was on the November ballot of 2019 when we passed our constitutional amendments.
Yes.
They're against charter school expansion, which we all know is important for educational opportunities. They were against the Monument Protection Act, which is protecting our Texas monuments. They want an increase in the gas tax, which is obviously hard on working families, because we've got to get to work, and we just can't afford that extra tax. And then the big one, of course, is they have been against every single property tax relief and reform bill that has ever been pushed. So in other words, they want your rent to the government, which is what I call property taxes, to go up. And they will fight any bill that will limit that.
It's more money coming in, more money to play with, and just more money out of our pockets as citizens,
right?
As Texas citizens.
The bottom line is they don't represent taxpayers. They just don't. They represent growing government, and they do not represent fiscal conservatism.
Okay. So right now it's 10:28. This is KHEAradio.com, 99.5 FM. There's some comments of people watching on social media, and I want to read this one. This one's pretty cool. This is from Jewel. She said that Mays knocked on our door during his campaign. What a great work ethic that we've seen. We are Galvestonians who are proud of his work. Thank you, Mays. Whenever 2018 is whenever you were running for office. So you specifically are out there knocking on doors, making it happen?
I knocked on 6,000 doors. And not once did someone say, you really need to support taxpayer-funded lobbying. And not once did someone say, hey, you really got to look out for those lobbyists up there. They're on our side, And I'll say this, on those 6,000 doors, it was great getting to sit on people's porches and talk with them about the issues they care about. And there were a number of times where I knocked on the door, and maybe it was a bad day that I had, or, just it's raining, or the kids were sick at home, or whatever. And all of a sudden, someone would reach out. I just knocked on their door, put their hand on my shoulder, and pray over me.
Mm-hmm.
And that never happened once in our state capitol with lobbyists. So that shows you where our values really are and should be.
Yeah. So you had mentioned, 2018, you ran for office, you got elected, and then did you say it was in session? Is it January to June of 2019? That was the
January, June of 2019, and We meet every other year, so we're a citizen legislature. Thank goodness we're not full time. We need to keep it that way. People need to go back home and have real jobs, and this is not a career politics thing. So
To meet with people too, to see
right,
what
exactly.
the climate is.
Exactly. You go back to your community, you go back to your district, you go back to your family. It's not like Washington, where everyone's always fighting, no one's ever doing anything. Up there, it's a full-time job, but what are they really doing? So it's not like that, thank goodness, in the Texas legislature.
Okay, so can you give me a recap? January to June 2019. What did it look like up there in Austin?
It's basically drinking from a fire hose, and then the way you need to look at it as far as bills getting passed is squeeze all the toothpaste out of the tube, and then what you can get back in it is what passes.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It's profoundly difficult to actually pass a bill up in Austin. A lot of it is moving the ball down the field. We did that with the taxpayer-funded lobbying ban. I'm extremely disappointed that didn't pass, but we did get disclosures passed. So we never had a taxpayer-funded lobbying disclosure before.
Mm-hmm.
And this session, at the very end, after the bill, to try to ban it failed, we were able to get an amendment on another bill that requires every taxing jurisdiction to disclose their taxpayer-funded lobbying expenditures and contracts. So I sent out, at the end of December of 2019, over 3,000 letters to every city, every county, every school district demanding that they produce their taxpayer-funded lobbying contracts. And I've gotten some pretty interesting responses so far.
Like what?
Well, I've gotten some calls, and one particular city said they felt like it was an attack. I've had a superintendent call me and said that he feels like he's being attacked. And I really am baffled by that, because all I'm saying is, look, tell us how you're spending taxpayer money and tell us what you're advocating for or against. So I think this whole fight to try to not disclose, and this whole fight to try to look for loopholes to not produce this information to me really gets to the immoral nature of taxpayer-funded lobbying, because it's one of those things where you'll hear sometimes from people that support it, but they're afraid to advocate for that position publicly because they know voters and taxpayers do not support that. So I've gotten a lot of interesting responses. Only about half of those 3,000 entities have responded so far, and some of them, let's be honest, are lying. Like Austin ISD, I know spends $180,000 a year on contract lobbyists. They said they had nothing to disclose to me.
Really?
Yeah. So I can't say I'm surprised about that.
Yeah.
But look, that just puts energy behind this of we need to ban this practice.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally wrong. It's fundamentally immoral, and we need to end it, because if they can't even follow a simple disclosure law, how are they advocating in our best interest? Well, they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I understand if it comes out of nowhere, but if you really shouldn't have something to hide, especially whenever you're using tax money, your taxpayer money, you want to be as open as possible. That just seems like that makes sense.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's why we've got a ballot proposition. So in the March 3rd Republican primary, at the end of your ballot, there are a number of propositions. And Proposition 3 is dealing with taxpayer-funded lobbying, and it says Texas should ban the practice of taxpayer-funded lobbying, which allows your tax dollars to be spent on lobbyists who work against the taxpayer.
So that's March 3rd?
That's March 3rd. Early voting starts next week, so I encourage everyone, say yes on that. Vote for it. It's a horrible practice. $41 million a year of your tax money is being spent on it right now. Let's leave that $41 million at home. We're supposed to be the ones advocating for our district, right? City council, school district, commissioners. That's who we want to hear from. We're not silencing anybody with a ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying. We just want more direct communication. We don't need this middleman that offices on Congress Avenue who certainly doesn't represent the values in our communities.
Yeah, it just makes sense. $41 million, we just split it up, keep it, never send it in.
Keep it back at home, and we've got nearly every rep I know has the cell phone of every local elected official. And the flip side of that is the state legislature does not send taxpayer-funded lobbyists to commissioner's court or city council or the school board, even though there's a lot more, school board, city council, and commissioner's courts than there are state legislatures. So, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So on March 3rd, whenever that vote comes in, it's that one's at the end, that proposition. Is there anything else interesting that we should look out for?
There actually is. So there's one other ballot proposition. They're all important. Every single one. There are 10 of them, and they're not binding. So in other words, if you vote for it, it doesn't mean that the ban is gonna pass. It's basically taking the temperature of the voters and saying, look, do we want this or do we not? And there's one other one on there that was a bill that I filed, and that's the putting prayer back in public schools. So Proposition 1 on the 2020 Republican primary ballot says Texas should not restrict or prohibit prayer in public schools. So that's another bill that I filed this session. So I'm lucky that two of my bills
out of 10
are on the Republican primary ballot proposition.
Yeah, I feel like it's not easy to get it on there on the ballot. What does that process look like?
You have to go through the Republican Party. So basically you go through, there's a whole structure just sort of like there is with the legislature, and each Senate district has 2 representatives through their state Republican executive committee. So that means there are 62 SREC members, and they have to vote on these things and decide what's on the ballot. So these are all voted on by those members, and that's how we get it on there. So in other words, you got to have majority agree with you that this is an important issue for the state of Texas. And so a majority did agree that taxpayer-funded lobbying and the prayer in public schools, the 2 of the bills that I filed, should be on there.
Yeah. And then so March 3rd, they're taking the temperature. That's our duty as citizens, and it's our right to go and vote and say this is what we would like to see. And then what's the next step after that?
We really finish the ballot. That's the second part of it is don't skip. Go all the way to the end. It's really important to finish the ballot. We can't skip over certain offices or certain elected positions. It's really important to have your vote counted all the way to the end. So the next step is we see the results. So we'll see the results the night of March 3rd, maybe the next day if things don't go well. Hopefully they do go well. And then that tells us, look, this percentage of primary voters want this to happen.
Okay.
Right? So that is the mandate, essentially, from primary voters of y'all get this done. We want this done in our state legislature. And trust me, we're listening. People follow. People are looking at this. And it's also broken down by district, too, so you can go back and look and say, well, how did this ballot proposition do per district, right?
Yeah.
So we can break that down and see. And it's sort of a real-time look at what the voters would like to see.
Yeah.
And what reforms the voters would like to see in our state legislature.
In one way or another, even if you're for it or against it, it's just important to go out and vote.
Exactly. Yeah. Your vote's got to count. We're a republic, and every vote counts. And at the end of the day, if you're not voting, it's tough to have your voice heard. You got to go out there and go vote the values that you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't do that, then Texas is frankly not going to be headed the right direction.
Yes. So this year, of 2019, y'all were in session January to June. This year, y'all aren't in session. It's just time to vote. How long does your term, last? And I mean, when are you up again, or how does that work? Are you running again?
Yeah, I am. I'm running again. I'll be on the ballot in March, unopposed, fortunately, for the primary, and then the general. I do have someone else running against me, and once you get through that, you go back in January of 2021. So I've got a 2-year term, and it's every 2 years got to run. That's part of it. It's just like Congress, same way. State Senate's 4 years, just like president. So
yeah.
So in the state house, everybody's got to get reelected every 2 years.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good amount of time? Is that enough time to get something done?
It's fairly short. It is. You got one session. So in other words, for each term, you get to go to the legislature one time, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a lot of time. It's tough to get stuff done in our state capital just because there are 181 people, right? So you got 150 state reps, you got 31 senators. So whatever you do, you've got to get a majority of 181 people to agree with you. And it takes a lot of time. And, man, there are some serious entrenched interest against conservative reforms in our state capital. Those lobbyists are everywhere. They have a lot of control over that building. It's not right. One of the things that I also wanted to change, and it was a bill that I filed, is stopping legislators from becoming lobbyists after they leave office. I think that's wrong.
Why is that bad?
Oh, because literally, you'll see. So, we don't know when someone's going to retire. They won't tell us a lot of times. But in that last session before they do retire, they're stoking the flames for the lobbying job that they want after. So in other words,
Okay.
they're planning. So I think that's why that ban is so important. Of course, not all of them become lobbyists. A handful do, but you look at it. I mean, it's typically chairman of a committee, right? So somebody that had a lot of bills going through, that had a lot of power in the House or the Senate, and they become lobbyists after, and they make a lot of money. And I don't think that's right, because you're using the connections that you got, because this office doesn't belong to us, right? No
Right.
elected office belongs to a person. It belongs to the people that elected them. And you're using that trust of the people that elected you to get a lobbying job. And I think that's wrong. And we
Mhm.
need to ban that. So I had a 5-year moratorium on that. So, from the time you leave office, the time you could become a registered lobbyist, 5-year ban. We got to pass that. So there are a lot of things we could do, like the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying and that cooling off period that I just talked about. That would help a lot to reduce the power of the Austin lobby and increase the power of the people that put us there, the citizens, taxpayers, and the voters.
Mhm. Okay, so here's a comment. This came in. This is from Mel. She said, and you can tell me if this is fair and accurate. You said, networking is majorly important to getting bills passed. Seems like one session isn't enough to create the relationships you need to gain support. Do you think that's why there is so much lobbying? And especially like those guys are like, hey, I'm retiring and now I'm still kind of doing the same thing. I already know everybody, but we're just going to kind of gang up and get more support.
Well, I mean, if they weren't there, you could get it done quicker, right? I mean, that's
less
that's
people,
the
yeah.
whole. It's this war of escalation, right? Where like the big cities are spending a fortune on lobbyists, right? So we're always having to combat them, and like the city of Houston spends several $100,000 a year, right? So you have this war between urban and rural, and it's truly this escalation where it's a lot harder to get things done, and frankly, the timeline would be a lot shorter, I think, without something like taxpayer-funded lobbying, and frankly, they're double dealing their own clients even. So like the city of Houston, it was discovered in session, spent about I think $500,000 or $600,000 hiring Hilco, which is a big lobbying firm, and one of the things they were supposed to fight was a bill that cut the cable franchising fee. So it's a tax cut bill. And the city said, y'all stop that for us. Well, it turns out that same lobbying firm was hired by the Cable Association to pass that bill.
Wow.
So they were literally double dealing the city. So, I mean, they are not representing us. And that's an example of why it's so hard to get things done, right? I mean, you had this same lobbying firm on both sides of an issue. One said, hey, we're hiring you to kill the bill. The other said, hey, we're hiring you to pass it. So, I mean, that's a little snapshot,
Yeah.
Of why, we have so many things in the way of what we need to pass and the values that we need put into action in our state legislature.
Is there, so to me, it sounds like, well, that's a huge conflict of interest. There should be some kind of regulation. Is there a regulation on the lobbyists, from the government in some way, and they're just not listening, or it's just like they can weasel around it?
There's not a conflict of interest regulation, but there is, they got to register as a lobbyist. They got to tell us which bills they're advocating for or against if they're a registered lobbyist. They got to tell us how much they're paid. And then we added in this new disclosure where, city, county, school districts' websites have to put on their website, how much they're spending, have to put the contract terms or the contract itself on the front page of their website. So, we're getting there. And frankly, at the end of the day, sunshine is the best disinfectant. The more sunshine we get, the better. So the more disclosures we get, the better. And a lot of times, even bond transparency, that's another good example. So for several sessions, we've been pushing, we've got to tell the taxpayers how much bonds really cost them, right? So you got to print on the ballot the total interest cost, because right now it's just the principal, right? So, well, you don't buy a house like that. You don't go in and say, well, I'm not worried. Mortgage company can tell me what the principal, the interest is later, right? No, you need to know that up front. So on the ballot, it should say what that cost is, right? And it should also say what the extra cost is to your average homeowner in that district is if that bond passed. So the increase in taxes. And they're fighting us on that all the time. They want to continue to hide that from us. So I feel like if we got that on the ballot and we had some transparency and some sunlight, printed on your ballot when you're voting, that's sunlight, and I think we'll get a lot of reform through that those means.
Can you actually explain, what give a hypothetical situation? Because I'm going to try and give one as well, and I could be totally off. But like if a city, let's say Lamarck, we got a lot of land. We want to bring in a pro football team. We want to be the Lamarck something. And so the city would kind of go and vote and say like, hey, we're going to get a bond to build a stadium. And then the taxes kind of increase. Is that what a bond is? Or
Yeah. That's a bond. So basically, that's called voter-supported debt or voter-approved debt. Now, there's other forms of debt that are a real problem, like something called certificate of obligation, and that's where it's supposed to be for an emergency. Certificate of obligation is, and it's a bond that you are paying for. Mm-hmm. So homeowners are paying for this, but it's not voter approved. And again, it's supposed to be after an emergency, but they're not always used that way. Sometimes they're used when like a county or a city know that they can't pass a bond with the voters, so they'll do a certificate of obligation. So there's some reform that we got to do there for sure. Actually, years ago, I stopped one in Chambers County. They were trying to do a certificate of obligation there, and it's very hard to stop those. So I had to go circulate a petition and get 10% of registered voters in the county to agree to put it on the ballot, and we got way more than 10%. I think we ended up getting like 17, or it was a lot.
Yeah.
And it was enough. Clearly, everyone that signed, was against it, and they ended up pulling the whole thing down, and canceling the bond issuance. But that's not right to do to people. There should be automatic elections.
Yeah.
We shouldn't put that burden on taxpayers to have to circulate a petition like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, these are really basic taxpayer right things, and it's just basic information of letting people know what they're on the hook for. I mean, when you sign up for a bond, it should tell you the whole cost of it, right? And what's the average home price in this political district, a school district or city or county, and what's the average increase in taxes that average home is going to have to pay, if they pass it.
Yeah, Tink Jackson, the city manager of Lamarck, he came on air several months ago because there was some voting that was taking place, and he likes to be on social media, video, interviews, news, as open as possible. They had a complete breakdown of everything. It was really interesting, and I was able to learn, it's like, hey, we haven't increased taxes like in 20 years or something like that, and they were just showing like this is where the money, is going. It was really good and interesting to see how that all went, and I thought, that's the way to do it. Be open. If somebody asks a question, give an answer. Or
that's right. Yeah, just tell them, because it's too bad we have cities like, Houston and Austin being resistant and just turning basic information over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the taxpayers are the one that are paying for all this. They need to know.
Yeah. So right now it's 10:47. This is KHEAradio.com, 99.5 FM. Speaking of Texas, State Representative Mays Middleton. There's something else that we were talking about before we went on air. It was ACE, and I know that they've helped out Abundant Life Christian School, and they've done a lot in the area. Can you share, what is ACE and what are y'all doing?
ACE is a really great program. So they're what I would call a tuition top-up scholarship. So basically, when a parent wants to send their child to a private school, and it's usually a Christian-based private school, that's the majority of the type of private schools that kids in the ACE program are going to. And they're low income. That's the second part of it, is they need to be certified by ACE as low income. Then ACE comes in there and provides tuition top-up scholarships. So in other words, if you can't quite make the tuition payment, they come in and provide $2,000 to $3,000 a year in scholarship. And I know they have some students here at Abundant Life, and I know another one at Rolling Brook Fellowship. I just found out the other day she's a family friend, and her daughter is on an ACE scholarship in Baytown, and they're all over the greater Gulf Coast area. They came into Texas about, I think, 3 years ago, and really they're a great partner for parents because, I mean, at the end of the day, parents know what's best for their own child. Parents are the ones that should decide which school their child goes to, and they're there to help them do that. So ACE is a really awesome program. I'm a big supporter of theirs. And then in other states that have a form of school choice, so like Colorado has a kind of a countywide school choice program, and Louisiana, they come in there and supplement the state money. So if it's not enough, so like in those states, there's a kind of a stipend, I guess, a percentage of money that would have been spent on that child if they had stayed in in a public school that follows the child. And then if that is not enough for the private school, then ACE comes in and supplements that difference between what the parents getting with state money and what the tuition is at that private school.
Yeah, I definitely support, the ability to have the choice. Me as a parent, I graduated from a private Christian school, and I enjoyed my experience. I talk to people all the time that absolutely dreaded school, but it was the only option for them, for whatever reason. And so, I loved, looking back on school, I loved it. And my son, he's in the second grade at Abundant Life Christian School, and, he's having a great time learning, is able to do everything else that other kids do. And I just think it's such a really good thing to offer, and it would be awesome if there were more programs like ACE, or if one day, and I've seen a lot of, the public school, teachers, officials, they do not want school choice. They don't want it, and I guess it just means, less money and funding for the public school. It would go to a different option, but really that helps who? Me, a parent, right?
Well, at the end of the day, I think 2017 was the last time we really had a big push in what we called education savings account, where it was 60% of the money that would have been spent on that child in a public school, and that was the statewide average, went with the child. Now, the other 40% remained in the public school system. So literally for every child that left the public school system for school choice, and this is, no one's making the kids leave. This is the parents deciding, right? So this is the moms and dads that we all know. These are the moms and dads in our communities that we're friends with, that go to our churches, that shop at our businesses. Those are the people deciding, right? So this is not a us versus them thing. This is about greater opportunity for everybody.
Yes.
We're a state and a nation of equality, of opportunity, and we got to use all of the tools. We got to use all of them, and it's not right to say, what, let's take that tool off the table. We've got special needs kids, we've got children of military families. We have kids that have religious needs that perhaps they want to go meet at a private Christian-based school. There's all sorts of things, and we need all those tools on the table. We can't be taking those away. So the last time that was pushed in 2017, I hope we do it again. At the end of the day, it's about the moms and dads in your community deciding, and I believe parents know best.
I agree.
They just do.
I agree. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Maybe even remind people about those propositions that are coming up March 3rd?
Well, they're all very important, but Proposition 1, of course, I recommend everybody vote yes. That's the Texas should not restrict or prohibit prayer in public schools. Vote yes. I think we definitely need prayer back in our public schools. That was a very terrible decision from our United States Supreme Court in 1960s. That was a Madeline Murray O'Hare case that, frankly, our Supreme Court legislated from the bench and took away public schools. Took away prayer from our public schools. So we need to overturn that for sure. And then also Proposition 3, which is Texas should ban the practice of taxpayer-funded lobbying, which allows your tax dollars to be spent on lobbyists who work against the taxpayer. So, of course, I'm voting yes on that. That's another really important one. So, all these ballot propositions are important. Everybody else on the ballot is important in that March 3rd Republican primary. Please exercise your right to vote. Your voice is important. And frankly, at the end of the day, that's how we keep Texas, Texas. We got to have everyone vote.
All right. This is KHEA Radio, 99.5 FM. Mr. Mays Middleton, thank you for hanging out today.
Thank you, Gardy.
All right. This is 99.5 KHEA. All right. See you guys. Y'all be blessed.